So we're back in the homestead. You'll notice it's a lot less green than the previous video. That's because we had to wait through another fall and winter dealing with more bureaucratic red tape. The barn inside did not get finished, although we did close out the building permit there. That will be a future project now, as we wanted to divert some resources towards the house. It turns out this whole post-COVID price hike for a lot of building materials hasn't really gone down. But in good news, we did finally get through some of that red tape and we got our permit issued. So we are kind of trudging forward and getting started now here in the spring of 2024. Got a couple loads of gravel delivered today, so we're going to start doing some site prep after we do a little bit of cleanup on some of the remnant leaves, fueling up the machines, cleaning things out, making sure we don't have too many mice chewing on cables. So let's get to it. All right, so rather than make this a complete vlog of everything I do at every minute, I'm going to spare the maintenance portion and get right into where we are at with the house build. Now, as you can see, we've done a little off camera since I started digging for the house. I ended up digging down about 15 inches to get through all of the top layer organics and remnant roots from when this was still a forest. Since I dug out or pulled out most of the trees instead of cutting them down, the vast majority of the roots had already been taken care of. After getting down that far, we brought in some crushed limestone to serve as a base for the footings. So where you see the outline of the footings now is about 8 inches of compacted stone, and then some well-draining sand in between the footings. What I'm about to spread out today is another 5 or so inches as a complete capillary break before I put in any of the footing forms. Now, all of this dig and fill work is related to some of the red tape I keep referring to. Now, this lot has a drainage creek that runs nearby. I'm pretty sure I've shown that in a previous video. But in 2013, there was an effort by a conservation group to tag every lot they could as unbuildable. So they used their funds and efforts to use the creek that we have to designate hundreds of acres as both wetland and as floodplain. Now, being in a floodplain comes with its own set of headaches, and really you can usually engineer your way around that. Wetlands, however, come with a "thou shalt not build here" edict. So we ended up having to hire a number of individuals, from soil scientists to surveyors, and involved the Army Corps of Engineers, the DNR, and a few others to help us officially reclassify the lot to its proper state. Now, realistically, we had a little over an acre that had a case for being wetlands, and so we left that. Right by the edges of the creek and some of the local lows that hold water seasonally made sense to just keep it there. But where you see the outline of the house now sits almost 11 feet higher than the record water level and 6 feet above the 500-year flood elevation. Although it cost us an absurd amount of money, a ridiculous amount of headaches, and a massive schedule delay to get the project underway, we're finally here. Now, was it worth it? Well, given the massive jump in property prices that came during that whole COVID thing, I think we still came out ahead versus trying to find another lot to build on, even if only barely. Anyway, I'm going to avoid getting even higher on my soapbox about the system and get back to the tasks at hand. And so, over the course of a weekend, I finished spreading and grading that layer of crushed stone and moved the topsoil I dug out to another part of our lot, as we won't be using that again until it's time to backfill. Starting a new weekend, we're on to forming our footings. Now, I had gone back and forth on whether to form the footings with 2x lumber and add a traditional footing drain, or to use an all-in-one leave-in-place type solution. And since I'm only planning on doing this once, and we don't have any need for 2x8 lumber in the actual build, I opted for the all-in-one solution. Now, there's actually 2 all-in-ones available. Most people know it as Formadrain, and that's one brand that's available. We're using, however, Prinsco's ProForm HD. The main difference being that this is a polyethylene plastic instead of a PVC plastic. Now, for me, I find 3 main drivers for using the ProForm all-in-one versus the Formadrain. One, and it's a big one, it costs less than Formadrain, and it has built-in couplings, further saving on price. The Formadrain couplings are sold as an accessory item. The price per foot for Formadrain here early in 2024 came out to around $3.15 per lineal foot. Now, each side of the footing is included in that, and with that, we have over 400 foot of lineal needs, so the savings add up when the Proform HD with the sock and couplers pre-installed was only $2.10 per foot. That's over $400 of savings just here on the footing forms. It's also super close per foot to what would have cost us for forming lumber in a traditional drain for lumber that we couldn't then reuse. Point number 2, polyethylene doesn't crack in the colder temperatures the same way PVC can. Now, once it's all buried and backfilled, it doesn't matter, but the durability is important to me because it's also synonymous with being a little bit forgiving to mistakes, and as an amateur, that's particularly important. And 3, it was much more available in my area. I only had to drive about 25 or 30 minutes for it, where the closest true supplier for Formadrain was almost 2 hours away. And I know I could have gone to Menards to get Formadrain, but I'm not paying an additional 10% on top of the already steep premium for the known name. So to prep for the footings, it's one more pass with the compactor over the gravel, and then getting our layout in place. Now with our soil conditions, prep work, and house plans, we only needed to do an 18-inch by 6-inch footing. But because I'm an engineer and like to build in margin into everything I do, even though I know the code tables already have margin, we upsized to a 22 by 8 footer. In reality, my main concern is that since we aren't just laying out a rectangle, it's a little more complicated, I wanted to leave extra margin in case I was slightly out of square on some dimension, and the extra 4 inches of wiggle room to shift the ICFs around once we started stacking really was a big part of why we upsized. Now, Alila had come out and helped get the batter boards and string lines in place for the outer dimensions of our walls, and I worked on getting most of our outer footing forms in place solo. I'm always happy to accept her help, but since I'm some sort of weird anomaly that isn't bothered by cold and wet, and this spring was particularly wet, one of the wettest on records, you'll notice her appearances are limited during this phase of the build. But eventually, we did get our forms in place, we went on to placing our rebar, and this is where Alila did step up quite a bit, and she ended up tying the vast majority of our bar quite like a pro.
Alright, so I was a little bit late getting to site today, and the concrete truck was already basically pulling up, so I didn't get a lot of footage of us pouring it, but we spent this Saturday morning pouring our footings. So we are kind of on our way to actually building this house. So all the way around, except for the strip footing here and the strip footing over there, we fell a little bit short of concrete, but we'll pour that when we actually get the walls in place. And those blocks are coming in a day or two, so pretty soon we're going to start shaping up a real house.
Now, as we wrap up a few days worth of work, I want to thank you for watching this far if you have. And if you aren't already subscribed, please consider following along as this build continues and encourage me to keep uploading by hitting that like and subscribe button below. And if you're really feeling like engaging, leave me a comment below. I'm certain I'm making a ton of mistakes along the way, and I welcome your feedback on the gotchas that may still be in my future. And so as I tease the footage of the blocks actually being on site, hopefully we'll see you in the next one.